The Walt Disney Company just released a statement saying they won't be naming a successor until early 2026, that being for Bob Iger. What's more, they've actually announced that Mark Parker will be stepping down as the chairman of the Walt Disney Company board of directors, and he'll be replaced by Bob Gorman. No, not Bob Gorman. James Gorman over from Morgan Stanley. Sorry, there's so many Bobs, it's hard to keep track of them all. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and here with me is one take legend, Mr. VashSky. Vash, are you ready to record this one again?
I am ready to record this one again. People don't probably know what we're talking about. Well, the original recording did not actually process, which is very unfortunate, but you know what? That allows us to get even more organized and get it a little bit more in a digestible package for you, so that way you know what is going on within the Walt Disney Company.
That's right. That's right. We, StreamYard issues notwithstanding, we do want to talk about this. The reason that we're recording it again this morning is because we want to talk to you about the fact that Disney is not going to name Bob Iger's successor until early 2026. This is obviously a delay from the implication that they've been making recently that any day now they would be naming the next CEO of the Walt Disney Company. They've got an earnings call coming up on November 14th. But we will not know by then whether or not Bob Iger successfully made Dana Walden into his successor. The company says Mark Parker resigned as chairman and named James Gorman as his replacement. This by Sabella Ohia. Forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce your name, sir or madam. Disney said it would name longtime chief executive Bob Iger's replacement in early 2026 and tapped a new board chairman. Signs to investors that the company's succession process is advancing after past turbulence. This is the first I'm hearing of this. Vash, I thought that the CEO succession process was going smoothly, except for the fact that one time Bob Chapek did something that Bob Iger didn't want him to do.
Well, I regret to inform you, Jonas, that maybe this that process hasn't been working out as smoothly as the Walt Disney Company had liked. To go from Bob Iger, then to Bob Chapek, and back to Bob Iger again in the short span of only a couple of years or so, and the way it actually did happen, as has been unbelievably cataloged by both the New York Times and Alex Sherman specifically, it just hasn't gone that well, Jonas. I must say, and also too, you have some activist investors that have been adding their voice as well.
That's right, and the fact that this botched succession process has opened up Disney to something that they really don't want, which is to have outside opinions coming in and having legitimate criticism for the way that the Walt Disney Company works. Bob Iger does not take criticism well. He likes to say "aw shucks" and move on, much like an older gentlemanly Mickey Mouse who has actually messed up quite a bit. He needs a Minnie Mouse to set him straight. Anyways, let's move on from that idea very quickly. The company said former Morgan Stanley CEO James Gorman, who is the chair of its succession committee, would become board chairman on January 2nd, 2025, replacing Mark Parker, who plans to resign. Appointing a new CEO is a critical top priority for Disney, Gorman said. This timing reflects the progress the succession planning committee and the board are making and will allow ample time for a successful transition before the conclusion of Bob Iger's contract in December of 2026, he said. Of course, there's also the fact that Bob Iger will technically be a Walt Disney Company employee at least until 2031 because he has something called like a security contract. He'll have a consulting contract, for lack of a better term for it, that goes until December of 2031. Now, that was renewed and re-upped when he came in as CEO, by the way. The stakes are high for Disney's board, which has been criticized by some investors for its past handling of succession. That's growing quite a bit, by the way. We're now seeing articles in The Hollywood Reporter that are kind of open about the fact that Bob Iger, would you please kindly leave at your earliest convenience. During Iger's first stint as CEO, he positioned at least 3 executives to succeed him, only to repeatedly extend his own contract. Bob Chapek, his eventual successor, became CEO in early 2020, but was ousted 2 years later after clashing with Iger. Are they trying to say? I'm assuming they're not including Bob Chapek in the list of 3 executives that he repeatedly extended over. I'm going to say Kevin Mayer, Tom Staggs. Is there another one in there, Vash, that we're missing? Even though I know there were plenty of people that were supposedly the next CEO.
Jay Rasulo.
Ah, that's right, Jay Rasulo. That's right. But of course, the accusation was that he was a stalking horse, just placed there in order to make Tom Staggs make it look like there was actually a competition, and that Tom Staggs was actually going to be CEO. Is that the right one? There's been so many possible CEOs, but here we are. Gorman joined Disney's board earlier this year and was tapped to lead the search for Iger's successor in August. He's executive chairman of Morgan Stanley, will be stepping down from that role on December 31st of this year. Disney on Monday said that Parker's resignation will be effective January 2nd after a 9-year career at Disney. Parker, executive chairman of Nike, was elected chairman in early 2023. He was put there to replace Susan Arnold, who was the executive chairman after Bob Iger. Forgive me if I've repeated myself. I've definitely repeated myself because we recorded this just a moment ago, but forgive me if I have repeated myself in this video. But Susan Arnold committed the primary sin that anyone at the Walt Disney Company could do, which is to replace Bob Iger in a role. And anyone who does that needs to be shown the door immediately. Of course, she was put in that role after Bob Iger left. And Bob Iger kind of acted as Bob Chapek's boss, which is an interesting thing to say because he was already Bob Chapek's boss. And if you believe the rumors, if you believe the Wall Street Journal and CNBC, and of course the New York Times, Bob Iger put himself in the executive chairman role because he did not want to answer to shareholders, because he did not like getting on shareholder calls and having to answer all those piddly questions, which is funny because the board of directors, it's supposed to be their job to make the management accountable to shareholders. So I have some questions as to what exactly Bob Iger is supposed to be doing. Vash, you have any comment?
No, well, we did see that, right? Even at the last shareholders meeting where we didn't actually have calls taken by shareholders, but we had these, what is it, robocalls or these AI assisted questions, which were, not necessarily befitting, I would say, of somebody looking to get hard questions from their CEO. So that's been a very interesting process to watch. Also, too, I think you mentioned it before as well, Mark Parker, moving away from him, and specifically the relationships with China there that are afforded with somebody like Mark Parker. I believe you said last time, and I think it's very appropriate that the association with China was listening to some extent. Bob Chapek had actually said during the release of Multiverse of Madness, actually, that their reliance on China, while it had been let's say a beneficial relationship to them before, that they weren't overly reliant on them and that they could actually release their film slate and other products without China's involvement. That tune and tenor seemed to change as soon as not just Bob Iger was brought back into the fold, but Mark Parker specifically was made chairman of the board. We had a number of releases that weren't necessarily geared towards China that we then moved into that market. So it's been an interesting process to watch that. Now with Mark Parker gone and with Gorman actually making his replacement here, that's going to be interesting to watch, I would say.
I totally agree with you. And the fascinating thing that I see here is they needed to announce a CEO sometime very soon, or in this case it sounds like they needed to announce that something was happening. It's like when there is a big criminal activity that happens and the police stop it, you have to have someone go to jail in order to make it look like the police are doing something. So someone needs to be rolled on. You can't have no arrests here. Well, let's go over to CNBC to talk about what should have been announced soon. Iger's 4 direct reports: ESPN chairman Jimmy Pitaro, probably not going to get the job; Disney Experiences chairman Josh D'Amaro, front runner; Disney Entertainment co-chairman Dana Walden and Alan Bergman have all interviewed with the succession committee in recent weeks, sources said. Now, DeMauro has been doing a good job of getting his face out there, as has Dana Walden. But Dana Walden struggled recently with how to respond. I think the ABC News situation, which Pro has covered on his channel, we've stayed away from it a little bit on this channel because even though it is definitely a Walt Disney Company succession issue, it speaks to the popularity of of Dana Walden. We've tried to stay away from it because it is a political issue, even though we probably should cover it, as this is a channel that covers Disney and the business side of Disney. But Dana Walden did have some missteps, very public missteps, in which she refused to answer questions about an accusation made against ABC News. But those are the people that we should be talking about whether or not they're going to be CEO. I think this pushes it back even farther. Let's talk about Gorman for a second, though. Gorman joined Disney's board less than a year ago and was named the head of the succession committee in August. For those of you who follow this channel closely, you may recognize him from one of my favorite clips, this one.
Well, they're forming a succession committee, which I'll be joining, so I'll be able to.
This was after more than a year of that succession committee already being formed. So you could say it's a new succession committee with James Gorman at the head of it. But essentially, they were shuffling around papers and pretending like they were doing something. Bob Iger did say his number one priority when coming back to the company was finding a successor. That was back in 1972. No, that was several years ago that he's been laser focused, to borrow another political joke there. I don't think he's been very focused on finding his successor. I think it's been also while I'm redoing this company, I probably need to pay some lip service to having a CEO succession process. Parker, as Vash, as you mentioned, he did do a good job of strengthening those ties with China. This could be an indication that Disney is finally seeing the light, that maybe China is not the lifeboat that they originally imagined it would be. We no longer talk about Shanghai in the same way that we once did. I don't think it's going to be the saving grace of the company. Again, massive amounts of Disney revenue, a large percentage comes from, of course, American parks. Not American Parker, but American Parks, and most of that being at the Walt Disney World Resort Complex in Orlando, which is, of course, now got a big competitor coming up May 22nd with Epic Universe. Another thing we want to point out is that Gorman has experience with succession planning. He oversaw the orderly transfer of power of Morgan Stanley, with Ted Pick succeeding him as CEO there at the start of this year. There were 3 CEO candidates over there at Morgan Stanley. And when the CEO succession process completed, the people there were 3 candidates, and the 2 who didn't get the job stayed on, which is not something you usually see with people who are possible CEO candidates. That's usually make or break, which is why we see Kevin Mayer and Tom Staggs over there at Candle Media, which is why we see James Rasulo over there at iHeartRadio. He's just a board member over there. But this is why generally people leave if there's no longer any ambition for them to get that top spot. Pitaro doesn't seem like he's going to get it. And if they ever spin off ESPN, they probably want Jimmy Pitaro as the head of that. And Alan Bergman hasn't really done a good job of getting his name out there. I wouldn't say that Dana Walden has really done a good job of getting her name out there, but she's there. And she is a relatively young woman who has a bunch of Emmy Awards that her department has recently acquired. I haven't seen a lot of achievement on her part just yet. And Josh DeMauro just successfully raised prices on tickets at Walt Disney World, which I hate personally, the fact that Disney is now super expensive. And I hate the idea of a $450 fast pass, lightning lane, but that's the kind of thing that Wall Street would look at and say that it's a good thing. One more thing I want to add here. The Walt Disney stock price has gone up over the last few months, as you can see, coming up here. Of course, if we go to the 5-year, not doing that great, but if you go to the last 3 months, it is up and up in 5 days. But the news this morning is not necessarily moved the stock price. Vash, is there anything else that we need to add?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think the stock price actually going down in the wake of James Gorman actually being made the executive chairman, because I mean, I don't know. I suppose Mark Parker, I suppose he has a tremendous business acumen. Not to say that he does not, and he was also friends with Bob Iger. So this outside candidate, and perhaps Wall Street is seeing this as more turbulence at the top of the deck here, but. I'll say this. I mean, we've been critical of these of the culture of the Walt Disney Company, especially at the top ranks of the executive structure, and how it's been a little bit, maybe, I don't want to, for lack of a better term, incestuous, right? It really could benefit from some outside eyes taking a look at this situation. So, in my opinion, I know James Gorman isn't perfect, but bringing him into the fold the way that they have, putting him on the succession committee was, I think, a big step. But putting him as the executive chairman, like you said, the adult in the room.
Really good point there, Vash, and
Okay.
the fact that the Walt Disney Company board, they've been buddy for a while, and it seems like they were mostly there to collect their board stipends and get their free admission to Disney parks, which we don't hear many stories about board members actually going to the Disney parks, but they haven't been very engaged, it seems, with trying to keep shareholder interests at the front of their minds and protect shareholder interests when dealing with Disney company management. Also, Safra Catz leaving the company recently, as she stepped down as a board member recently, and I would say that's a negative, even though there is some relationship there with her obviously being at Oracle, and the fact that Skydance is now buying Paramount, a very minor competitor compared to the Walt Disney Company. For me, James Gorman, it represents a grown-up entering the room, someone who is not necessarily focused on that headline chasing that we often see from the Walt Disney Company. Having the first BIPOC person on a Tuesday who happened to hit a certain metric kind of thinking that we see from the Walt Disney Company, where they want you to feel like the company is doing better more than they actually want to perform well. So I don't know. I want to throw this to our commenters. I've spoken very positively about someone who is in charge of the Walt Disney Company here at this point, and usually that's very controversial with our commenters. So please let me know just what you think of that here in the comment section down below. Like this video if you like this video, and if you wouldn't mind, we've recorded this video twice, so please consider subscribing to That Park Plays for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.